Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Niv-Mizzet Reborn. So Niv-Mizzet Reborn is a 5-color commander, and he is a 6/6 flyer that says when he enters, reveal the top 10 cards of your library for each color pair. So for each card that is exactly 2 colors and is a specific 2 colors, choose a card that's exactly those colors from among them, put the chosen cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So hypothetically, if the top 10 cards all included 2 color cards that were in every different color pair, so like, Boros, Simic, Golgari, etc., we could hypothetically draw up to 10 cards. Now, in practice, we are not going to draw that many. We are going to average around 3 to 4, but we can draw more or less in some cases. So the main restriction and build around thing that's going on with this deck is we have to figure out how to play not only a lot of 2-color cards, but specifically how to diversify those 2 colors into the different pairs. So with that said, as you can see, we have 51 multicolor cards in the deck, so about half of our entire deck is made up of these cards. Obviously, lands are not counted, so the vast majority of our spells are multicolor cards. And then I've done my best to diversify the different colors, although obviously some colors were going to be natural fits and have more good cards in those pairs than others. In particular, Simic will tend to have the most color pair cards that we actually want to play. And then on the other side, color pairs like Dimir, Golgari, and Rakdos tend to have the least of them. So actually breaking these cards down by the categories that they're in, we have General Ferrus Rokerrick. After all, we're going to be playing a bunch of multicolor spells, so this seems an obvious inclusion. Nahiri's Resolve and Soul Herder are both ways that we can blink Niv-Mizzet and get more cards off of the trigger again. We have a bunch of cantrip/filtering cards of various kinds in our deck, like Uro and Pillage the Bog. Some card draw, although we can't completely get away from playing some monocolor cards like Remora, Study, and Library, as well as like the One Ring and Esper Sentinel. We do have some Dak Faden, Kutzil, Timna. Counter spells, which I have deliberately oriented towards being the multicolor counter spells. Now, obviously, a lot of these are less efficient than cards like Flusterstorm or Swan Song, but you do have to make concessions with this deck in order to get a sufficient number of multicolor cards into it. But with that said, we are still playing the Red Blasts. Then we have our 31 lands, which is mostly the Fetch Revised Dual Mana base. Obviously, that is contributing a lot to this incredibly expensive price tag right here. So if you don't want to pay this and are unwilling to proxy, you can cut a lot of these cards for shock lands, and that should significantly reduce the price. Also Forbidden Orchard, because we just need a lot of different colors, and giving our opponent a 1/1 isn't that big of a deal. Similarly, Tarnished Citadel, taking 3 off of this is pretty bad, but we can tend to recoup that off of all the value we're getting. I've also deliberately included Rush of Inspiration as one of the few modal double-faced lands that is multicolor that isn't terrible when we cast the front face of it. Then we have Protection for Niv-Mizzet. We don't want it to get countered or killed. Mostly not countered, so here are all the multicolor cards that do that. A bunch of Ramp, which again, although we are playing cards like Birds and Delighted Halfling, I've mostly skewed towards having multicolor variants of all of these cards. Of particular note is Feyburrow Elder, which when Niv-Mizzet is in play, this can tap for all 5 colors of mana. Then we're going to have a lot of removal. A lot of the best multicolor cards tend to be spot removal spells, so you can see a lot of them here. Some notable cards are Fire Covenant and Aura Shards, and you can see more here, including Run and 6 to keep getting lands back. Then there's some sweepers, including Fracturing Gust and Merciless Eviction as the few multicolor sweepers that we could play. We could also play Supreme Verdict, obviously, but I mostly wanted ways that we could dodge around killing our own creatures. And then we have a few more, some tutors with Lim-Dûl's Vault included, and Lila, which also works pretty well with our multicolor spells. There's also a handful of other cards I considered. These were things like Kinnan and Crom. I also considered playing a Triome, but ultimately decided against it, but you could definitely include that, especially if you wind up cutting the Revised Duels. Took out all of the cheap blue counter spells, as well as a handful of other cards. Ultimately decided not to play Oko. And then Giganta, in regards to this card, the deck is actually pretty close to being able to run Giganta as a companion. I believe there are only 3 cards in the deck that are preventing it at the moment. So one is Rush of Inspiration, which we definitely do not need to play. This could just be a different land. There's also Vexing Shusher, which has the 2 hybrid symbols in here. Again, we definitely do not require Vexing Shusher in the deck. And then lastly, Fracturing Gust is also preventing it from playing Giganta. Now, mainly, aside from the other 2, Fracturing Gust is the real reason that I wanted this card in the deck, and that's why we're not playing Giganta. But you definitely could take them all out and have Giganta in the sideboard. It's just that Giganta in particular isn't really doing anything that great for our deck, but you could easily remove these 3 cards and run Giganta. So anyways, as you can see, we don't really have any sort of infinite combo or like, giant Eldrazi Titan or anything like that that's going to win the game for us. It's mostly about just having a ton of cards, getting a lot of card advantage over our opponents, and our main ways to win are either going to be bashing in with Niv-Mizzet or just making a lot of golem tokens with General Ferrous Rokarik. That's another option we have. We can also just simply control the board to an incredibly large extent with the vast amount of removal and counter spells that we have in the deck. Another path to victory is getting Wrenn and 6 all the way up to 7, ulting it, and then being able to just keep recasting these spells from the graveyard, if for no other reason than to just keep using Lightning Helix as an example to burn out our opponents. But anyway, with that said, that is going to do it for Niv-Mizzet Reborn in EDH.